All right, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to talk about Canelo Alvarez, Dazn, Errol Spence, Charlo, Caleb Plant, and the fact that Canelo Alvarez may be leaving Dazn, and if he does, then that is lights out for them in the United States. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So before I get into the subject matter of the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. Also share the videos, like the videos. It'll be very greatly appreciated if you do so. All right, so let's get into this because honestly, this is very good news for me, and it's something that though it's not a done deal, I am certainly hope does take place, and that is Canelo Alvarez leaving Dazn. If you guys recall, maybe about 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago, Eddie Hearn came and announced this really huge deal that he had with this streaming service. It was going to revolutionize boxing. It was going to do away with pay-per-view. All of this stuff that he said, as part of his transatlantic takeover of the United States, and in a boxing sense, obviously. And it all seems to have fallen apart, and the last bit of it falling apart would be Canelo Alvarez leaving. For when Eddie Hearn came over, he said that he had $1 billion, and with this $1 billion, he was going to be able to sign away all of these fighters. He was going to sign away all of PBC's specifically. He was going to sign away the PBC fighters, and they were going to wind up being over there with Dazn because there wasn't enough money for anybody to compete with them, right? Unfortunately, though, for him and Dazn, there's plenty of money, or I guess since they know that they want to participate in boxing in the United States, they must have known that there's a lot of money for boxing in the United States. And so Fox Sports, and Fox is one of the bigger channels that there is in the world, and definitely in the United States of America, decided that they were going to go into boxing, and dedicated a good amount of money and something that Dazn doesn't have, which is a promotional aspect to it, because they've got a lot of people who already watch Fox because because it's a free television. So if you have an antenna somewhere in the United States, you can get Fox. And so Fox will show, they'll have their pay-per-view shows, but they also have their regular boxing events, which you can see on regular TV. So unfortunately for Dazn, all of Eddie Hearn's predictions, none of them came true. He wasn't able to take barely anybody from the PBC. I think the only person that may have been the case with was Danny Jacobs, and they signed Danny Jacobs. They signed Devin Haney. They signed Gennady Golovkin, and that's about it. An older Gennady Golovkin. So Canelo Alvarez is now being pitched, and their big signing, their very big signing that they got was with Canelo Alvarez. And they've had Canelo Alvarez for several fights, and they always celebrate how many new subscribers they get when they get Canelo Alvarez. Although I suspect that once they get those subscribers and the fight is over, that those subscribers then ditch that application a month later, and they're not actually retained. Otherwise, why would they keep having all these big peaks when Canelo Alvarez signs? Because if Canelo Alvarez, if you peak because so many people signed, then they stayed, then they would still be there when the next fight came around in 6 months. But regardless, Canelo Alvarez has now been offered, according to Eddie Hearn, and according to the sources that I have, that says that he's taken it fairly seriously, a 3-fight deal with Fox. And why would he consider that? Because no one, I think, and this is why I would hope that he would consider that, is that nobody watches Fox. Canelo Alvarez's name is not growing. Canelo Alvarez, when he got to when he got to the zone, his name was on the rise. He was a young fighter. He had just had, I think, maybe 3 pay-per-views that were large pay-per-views. He had one against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., and then he had 2 against Gennady Golovkin. And those are pretty much the 3 big pay-per-view fights that he had since he had one that was really kind of on Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s dime. But he was a growing young fighter, and now that he's with Golden Boy, now that he's with Dazn, his influence, his name recognition has not gone up at all, because it's impossible for it to do that when nobody is watching your fights. He's getting paid a good amount of money, a very large amount of money. However, that's not doing anything for growing his name and getting him to be to the point where he can make even more money. He capped himself out at $35 million a fight. And I don't think that that's something that you necessarily have to do for somebody like Canelo Alvarez, when you know that Floyd Mayweather Jr. is somebody that when he was the biggest star in boxing was making $100 million a fight. So maybe Canelo Alvarez wants to get out and become the $100 million fighter that he could. And so how could that be? By fighting real fights that they do not have over there at DAZN. If you look at the last several fights that he's had at DAZN with guys like Rocky Fielding, Callum Smith, and Billy Joe Saunders. First of all, if anybody could see the fight in the United States, which they can't because it's on that closed network, they would be looking like they were trying to pull in fans from British fans. Doesn't make sense. But the fights that are available for him on Fox are guys like Charlo, somebody that is a popular fighter in the state of Texas. A fight between Charlo and Canelo Alvarez would be one of the biggest in boxing. And if they had it on pay-per-view, might be a $100 million fight, $120 million fight in Texas, which would allow Canelo Alvarez to make more than his $35 million, or actually the $26 million that he was making from DAZN, because they said it was originally $35 million, but when Canelo sued Oscar De La Hoya to get out of his contract, you find out that he's making $26 million, and that's about half as much money as he could be making off fights like the Jermall Charlo fight, if it's on pay-per-view, the Errol Spence Jr. fight, if it's on pay-per-view, because that is a big one that's available down the road. So, and the reason that I think I want to see it is because I think that Canelo Alvarez is good for boxing. These really big fights are good for boxing, and you're just not getting those fights over there at DAZN. You're getting Canelo Alvarez having a lot of press saying how good he is, but not anything in the ring that is going to get anybody excited about seeing boxing. So anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think. And with that, I'm out. Peace.